Welcome, future educators, to the second week of our discussion, the introduction to journalism. So, why journalism and what's really the history all about it? So let's start our lesson from John Spencer quotation that when students learn to make sense out of their world, they become the people who will transform it. So I know that you as a future educators will transform even the world of journalism once you have all the knowledge and information about the rules and regulation or even the history about this field. The objectives for the second week, at the end of week 2, at least 95% of the pre-service teachers will be able to determine the significance of journalism from its history down to its modern cultural relevance and recognize the principles of journalism in sample articles. Here's the brief history of campus journalism in the Philippines. It all started with the University of Santo Tomas published a Lilliputians in 1890. Of course, sila talaga yung mauuna kasi sila naman talaga yung oldest extant university charter in the Philippines and even in the Asia. University of the Philippines published the College Folio, now the Philippine Collegian in 1910. So sila yung sumunod and followed by the Church of the University, Philippine Normal University, the Guidon of the Ateneo de Manila University, and the Varsitarian of the University of Santo Tomas were also published 2 years later. And then, sumunod din yung kay Carlos P. Romulo, who edited the Coconut, the official student publication of the Manila High School, now the Rolo High School. It was published in 1912 and is now considered as a first and oldest high school newspaper in the country. So yun yung tandaan natin yung Coconut as the first and oldest high school newspaper in the Philippines. So I have here an additional information about Carlos P. Romulo. He was an author and the foremost diplomat of the Philippines and the only Filipino journalist to win the Pulitzer Prize and the first Asian to serve as president of the UN General Assembly on 1949. So I have here an example of a video when he was serving the United Nations.
A system of worldwide atomic control for peace must still be resolved. The United Nations, striving toward that end, expresses its aim through President Romulo of the Assembly.
The impasse that now exists regarding the international control of atomic energy must be broken, and the Assembly must face this question squarely for the sake of mankind and for the peace of the world.
Ayun, ganun kagaling si Carlos P. Romulo in speaking. Imagine nyo guys, 16 years old pa lang siya, naging reporter na siya, and naging journalist din siya. And he was the author of the I Am a Filipino. It is a literary work that focuses the great desire of Filipinos having their own freedom. In 1923, La Union High School published the La Union Tab, the first printed and regularly issued high school newspaper in the country. The cycle of campus journalism activity. So first, thinking what to write. So dito yung iisipin mo talaga, are you going to write for the front page sa news, sa editorial page, or it could be feature page, literary page, or sa sport page. So, it depends on the individual kung saan talaga siya master or mas expert with sa field na yon. And next is the gathering the data. So, answering the WH questions. And next is to write the facts. So once you write the facts, have to follow the rules or what would be the structure that you wanted to use. Next is copy reading. That's very important, the technicalities of the writing. Then printing. Then the last one is releasing the paper. So that's how the cycle of that's the cycle of campus journalism. So after releasing the paper, you'll do the process again. It's time to define journalism in general. So the word journal comes from the Latin word journa, which means daily. In ancient Rome, short bulletins of battles, fires, and elections compiled by government officials were posted up in public places. These were called acta journa, which means daily events. And then for Noah Webster, he described journalism as the occupation of writing for publication in newspapers and other periodicals. So I have here another definition of from other perspective. So something that embraces all forms in which or through which the news and comments on the news reach the public. All that happens in the world, if such happenings hold interest for the public, and all the thoughts, actions, and ideas which these happenings stimulate become basic materials for the journalists. So yun yung according to Fraser F. Bond. So as long na nakukuha siya ng interest sa public or it reached the public, it is journalism for him. Ang goal naman talaga ng journalism is to inform, educate, entertain, and persuade people. Kaya more on talaga na gusto nila to reach the public. And then, we have from a school paper advisor of the City Schools of Manila. It is an enjoyable co-curricular activity of the school paper staff in collecting, organizing, and presenting news in writing editorials, columns, literary articles, and features. In copy reading, proof reading, dummying, and writing headlines, all for the purpose of putting out a school organ. Bakit kaya siya nagiging enjoyable co-curricular activity of the school paper? Kasi campus journalism supports the development and promotion of student journalism, right of the youth, and preserving the integrity of students. So it will help them to mold their skills in terms of writing, sa editing, copy reading, diba? So they will consider all of it. The three main kinds of media, we have the print media, so ito yung mga written form, the broadcast media or the oral form, and lastly, the digital media or the visual form. So ito yung mga examples ng print media. It is a collective term for media printed on paper that includes small circulation community-based newspapers and magazines as well. So, pwedeng yung newspapers, flyers, newsletters, we consider them as print media. For broadcast media naman guys, it describes the traditional forms of media that include television and radio. Technically, yung term na broadcast media kasi guys, it can include the internet as well and even such things as Bluetooth marketing and other forms of location-based transmission. Sa digital media naman guys, this is any media that are encoded in machine-readable formats. So, digital media can be created, viewed, distributed, modified, and preserved on digital electronics devices. Okay? Yun yung pagkakaiba nila pag sa broadcasting and then sa print media. So, it depends upon you what would be the best media for you. According to Oxford Dictionary, print media is a broadly any written or pictorial form of communication produced mechanically or electronically using printing, photocopying, or digital methods from which multiple copies can be made through automated processes. So more narrowly, any form of ink and paper communication that is not handwritten or hand typed, including books, circular journals, lithographs, memos, magazine newspapers, pamphlets, and periodicals. But let's take a look on what is it when they talk about lithographs.
Lithograph is a printing term, but do you actually know what that means? The term comes from the Greek words for stone and to write. The technique works on the principle that water and grease repel each other. An image is applied to a stone surface using a greasy crayon, pencil, or other instrument, and then is covered with a thin layer of water. When ink is applied to the stone, it sticks to the greasy medium and not the areas where water is present. After some chemical processing, it's placed in a press and the image is transferred onto the page, creating a mirrored image.
Again, for broadcast media, it describes the traditional forms of media that include television and radio. The three forms of broadcast media, we have the radio, television, and movie. So, why do you think movie is included dun sa broadcast media? Kasi pag sinabi nating media, it is means of mass communication. So, ang movie could be a way of communicating information to others. Kaya yung iba guys, may mga movies talaga na binaband, lalo na pag yung information na binibigay ay mali. So, one of the example that I could give to you is yung movie na Abominable. I love that movie, pero nga, it was banned by different country kasi it showed a map acknowledging China's claim to a disputed part of the South China Sea. So, multiple countries talaga nag-ban like China, Vietnam, Malaysia, and even Philippines. Kaya nagtaka ako nung 2019, that was last year, kung ba't hindi siya pinalabas dito sa Pilipinas. Kasi nga, may mali dun sa movie na yon. So, ito na yun guys, yung Abominable na movie. It was banned in the Philippines. And now, let's listen from an expert na binalita dun sa GMA News Affair about what's the reason behind bakit siya na-banned. Okay?
Well, kasi yung ginawa doon, parang subtle na propaganda and conditioning, no? Some would even say na subliminal messaging yon. Parang kasimple lang na bigla nilang ipapasok yan, ipa-flash nila yung 9 dash line na yan. Ayaw natin mangyari yon na after a few years, sasabihin nila or insist nila na tanggap na yan ng mga tao.
Now let us reflect about the explanation of the expert. Another definition of digital media, it comprises both internet and mobile mass communication. Internet media comprise such services as email, social medias, websites, and internet-based radio and television. And in this way, they can use the easy accessibility and outreach capabilities the internet affords, as thereby easily broadcast information through many different regions of the world simultaneously and cost efficiently. Because, diba, kaysa naman sa pag-print media, gagastos ka talaga with the materials. But for digital media, it would be easier for them. And there are lots of resources na pwedeng i-save. And we could easily, parang madali lang din siyang nasisaving information without, na hindi nasisira. Unlike dun sa print media. So you have your example of forms of the digital media, guys. We have the video games, social media, for cell phones, and then internet-based radio and television. So let's find out why is it that video games is a form of digital media.
So what is a video games journalist and what does the role involve?
Video game journalists, some people might be reviewing video games, some people might be looking at video game culture. Sometimes you get to interview developers or play games a little early, and then you get to tell people about those games and what makes them awesome, basically.
The recorded interview of a video game journalist came from this YouTube channel, Spawn Point. So covering video games for a living is a dream job for a lot of people nowadays naman siguro, 'di ba? With the rise of the internet and blogging came the ability for everyone who could talk about video games to make their opinions and thoughts known. Today, every genre and platform has multiple game sites dedicated to covering it. Kaya yun sila na tinatawag na game journalist. The second part of the discussion is to recognize important figures to the world of journalism and to establish a timeline leading to today's world of journalism. In 1906, Lee DeForest was known as the father of modern radio. He owned or patents the key element of radio known as the audio tube. So ito yung nasa picture that takes another decade to perfect it. Sobrang tagal tsaka hirap talaga niyang gawin. And then in 1866, it's the year of the completion of the Atlantic cable that enabled an American wire service, and the New York Associated Press exchanged news with the British wire service Reuters. So nagkakaroon na ng wire service that 1866. Tapos sumunod yung 1906, nagkaroon na ng radio kasi meron ng wire service, and then followed by 1911 by Charles Path that introduces the silent newsreel to American theaters. So sa mga theater before, nagkaroon na din sila ng, kaya siya tinatawag na silent kasi hindi masyadong halat. But there's a hidden message dun sa kinakabit nila. 1904, Ivy Ledbetter Lee, founder of PR or Public Relations. So he opened a publicity firm that dedicated to honest and truthful promotion of clients in New York. So nagkaroon na siya ng public relation, or there's a connection between the speaker or source ng information and the receiver or the public. And then in 1904, sumikat na din yung mga magazines that instigator for social reform in the 20th century. So, Macracking, Mackler's Magazine, Tarbell, and Standard Oil Company. So, this year of 1904, through magazines, nagkakaroon na din ng nagbibigay ng promotion ng isang company and even showing what's the beauty through pictures. The next is in 1916, the New Jersey Lee DeForest. So siya di ba yung nag-start nung sa radio, who broadcast the presidential election results for the first time. So, nagkaroon nga din ng issue about it that they got the result wrong. Okay? And in 1970, nagkaroon ng downsizing equipment. So reporters can cover on-the-spot news with portable cameras. And reporters can send pictures back to the station via microwave. So imagine yung development, diba? From 19s hanggang, let's check it. From 1866, from 1906 kasi sa Lee DeForest again, yung sa modern radio. Tapos, nung nagbigay na siya ng information for the first time on 1916, so maganda-ganda na yon yung development na ginawa niya. Kasi they were able to broadcast na nila yung result sa public for the first time. So, maganda yung pagka-develop. And then, noong 1917, di lang broadcast, they could even show pictures and using cameras, portable cameras na din. And then, on 1998, so naabutan ko na to, using the MP3 players. So, sobrang sikat niya in terms of music. It was first introduced, and then in 2001, iPods introduced and podcast carry news, ads, and programming. So, nagkaroon na din ng improvement in terms of promoting products or even company. Kasi 'di ba nung dito sa let's check, no 1904 through magazines, but on 1998 they could even insert na yung ads or promotion through podcast. And then in 1982, Federal Communications Commission or FCC agreed upon rules for using direct broadcast satellites. Ayun, mas nag-improve na siya because they use satellites na hindi lang sa wire or through radio. So, mas nagiging madami o lumalawak yung audiences nila or listeners. And then, on 1945, bago yung lahat, American Broadcasting Company, nag-start yung ABC. And then, it was organized by Edward G. Nobel. And then, 1922 naman, before yun sa New York, they goes on the air with the first commercial radio station. So, imagine nyo yun. Ganon kadali yung development. And in 1999, the Napster, the file sharing program, and users were able to download copyrighted music without paying for it, caused legal battles. So, dito naman talaga, kasi before, di ba, pinapatay naman talaga ang music industry if we just keep on downloading yung mga works of art ng iba without even paying for it. For 1936, British Broadcasting Company or BBC, so sa London siya, it's the world's first open circuit TV broadcast. So, mas maganda, mas madaling nag-improve yung sa London. Kasi 1936 pa lang, meron na silang TV broadcast. While the other countries, they are still using radio. And then, it's the first TV station in the world to offer regular programming. So, tandaan natin yan na sila pala yung pinakauna sa London na BBC ang nag-offer ng regular programming. Kasi maganda nga naman yun kasi nakukuha nila yung audiences nila at sumasabay din yung mga audience nila about the program that they are offering. And on July 20, 1969, when man landed on the moon, that's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. That was announced by Neil Armstrong, the moon landing broadcast to national audience. And by the way guys, just a heads up kasi nalilito kayo, fina-follow natin is by country kung paano nag-start yung journalism, okay? Huwag tayo sa year mag-focus. Hindi lang tayo sa year mag-focus, kundi by country din, kung kailan sila nag-start. And then in 1972, yung Sony company introduces video cassette recorder for educational and business uses. So, of course, hindi lang naman siguro specific country ang gumamit nito. At pag sumikat na, of course, it was also used by the other countries. And on 1970, ito na yung year, guys, na nag-start yung computers. So, may mga computers na to began replacing typewriters in newsroom in 1970. So, hindi lang, kasi pag typewriter, may hirap naman talaga in terms of giving information or journalism. So, that's computer, the one that we're using nowadays, that makes our work more efficient. And then in 1939, the National Broadcasting Company or NBC in New York, specifically si David Sarnoff, launches at World's Fair who featured President Franklin D. Roosevelt. So, general questions wherein who the president to first appear on television. So, that's Franklin Roosevelt. Okay? And in 1990, the World Wide Web, nag-start siya sa Switzerland and enabled anyone with a computer to establish a homepage on the internet. And napakaganda talaga pag may homepage ka, kasi yung iba, diba, sa radio, they use satellite. Pero dito naman, sa Switzerland using World Wide Web, they could reach other countries easily. Diba? And then in February 2009, hanggang sa present or digital transition, all television stations begin broadcasting in digital format only and postponed to summer of 2009 and requires a special receiver to get the signal. So, hanggang sa ngayon naman, mas maganda yung journalism broadcasting. Okay? So, that's all about the development of the world journalism. Again, wag kayong focus sa kung anong year na dapat pagkasunod-sunod. Let's just focus dun sa specific country. Okay? So, that's all.